Hey everybody, and welcome to Heroes in Homebrew. I'm Tristan. This is yet another video about the OSR, the Old School Renaissance Gaming Community. If you are curious about what it is, maybe it'll help you make a decision on where to start. As I said in previous video, my video of why I'm leaving 5e, I found the OSR through basically just looking around for something new to play. So I was getting tired, and I wanted something else. I wanted something new. I played the Alien RPG, which is amazing. I love that game. Cyberpunk, Call of Cthulhu, and they're fun, but the opportunities to play those games were very far and few between. I stepped away for a while, and then started getting the hankering to come back in, and I decided, all right, I want to play something kind of looking around. Maybe I want to do something in the fantasy realms, but not high fantasy, not like D&D. And so I went on YouTube and I found videos, and I found basic fantasy role playing. Basic fantasy role playing game for someone coming from 5e is probably your best point of entry. For one, the core rule book is like $7. Well, I'm in Canada, so Canadian, it was like $7 on Amazon. It has an amazing community behind it, creating a lot of supplements and adventures that are all free to download. The PDF of the anything that's PDF for basic fantasy role playing is free to download. Most of the core stuff, the adventures, the field guide, which is kind of like the monster manual. They have an equipment book, the core books. All of those are sold at cost. So you're only paying the price it costs to print it, and that's it. So for the price of one 5e book, you can have virtually almost all of the books that are in print for basic fantasy role playing. A lot of the adventure books, it's multiple adventures inside. They have adventure anthologies. I think there's 5 or 6 of them that have like 10 adventures each in them. It's great. If you want an entry point into getting into OSR, if you're curious about it and you're not sure if you want to be very involved, just get the core rules of basic fantasy role playing and you're good to go. You have everything you need to play the game there. You don't need anything else. And anything else you might want is free to download in PDF. This is kind of the best of both worlds because it includes a lot of mechanics that might be familiar to 5e players, even if they aren't exactly 5e, like ascending armor class, roll 20-sided dice and to beat the armor class, stuff like that. So a lot of the mechanics are very familiar. So that was my first book that I got. I downloaded the PDF and I decided I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy the print version. The same with Whitebox. Whitebox is a sort of an offshoot of a game called Swords and Wizardry, which was the sort of retro clone. Retro clone is when they take the original rules from the original D&D and sort of modernize them. They don't change the rules that much, or they clarify some of the rules that might be contradictory, but the layout of the books is updated, the writing is updated, so it's a little clearer, a little easier to understand. So Whitebox came from the retro clone of Swords and Wizardry, whereas Swords and Wizardry was kind of a retro clone of the BX, the Basic Expert, I believe. Again, someone's going to correct me in the comments. The Whitebox is sort of a retro clone of the very original D&D from 1974. The book is small. It's like pamphlet size. I think it's about 130 pages or so. Most of that is monsters and spells. You'll notice if you get into OSR, you're going to notice that a lot of them are 4 races and 4 classes. But the original D&D was you had 4 races, 4 classes. Actually, I think the original one was even you had races as a class. So I think dwarf and elf or halfling and dwarf or something like that were a class and a race. So I picked up Whitebox as well. And looking through that and looking through basic fantasy, I realized, oh, okay, a lot of these rules are very similar and they're interchangeable. And that's when I started to dig deeper into the OSR and what it kind of means. as a lot of these different products are sort of like mix and match. You can like, I like a rule from this. I'm going to exchange it for this rule over here because I think it's going to work better for my table, things like that. That's very cool. You can't really do that with D&D. Like D&D is not, like DnD5e is not compatible really to DnD4e or to 3.5, and certainly not to the originals very much, without doing a lot of work. And I mean, as a DM or a game master, you've got a lot of work to do anyway. Do you really need to keep hacking apart this game when there's other games that are much easier to put together? So I got that white box. Also, PDF is free, and it's like $5 on Amazon. It's amazing. Now, one of the pure retro clones out there, I have not played it. I think I have the PDF of the free version, the basic. It's not as complete as the printed, the full rule books, but they have a free like kind of quick start version of it. The old school essentials. Old school essentials is again very much based on the basic set, and they have old school essentials advanced or experts, which I think is supposed to be the expert. So like D&D at one point came in a basic and an expert. So basic was simpler to learn, and expert had more built onto it. Old school essentials are very much like that. The printed versions of old school essentials, however, a bit more expensive. They're not crazy expensive. I don't think there's not very many books that I've seen, save for a couple that are in the same price range as you would pay for a 5e book. But again, you're paying $20 or $30 for the printed version of OSE, and there's two books. You have the rules tome, sort of the GM's guide, and the player's tome. Whereas white box and basic fantasy, everything you need is in that one book. This is why I would say if you're getting into OSR, go with one of those two, especially if you're a game master and you're trying to introduce your players to this style of play and these games. You can buy a copy of White Box for your entire table for like $25, depending on how many people you got playing at a table. It's like $5 each. Why not? That's what I plan on doing when I run my first, when I finally get people at the table in person for Basic Fantasy. I'm buying them all a copy of it so that they can have it. Also, Old School Essentials is it's very popular in the OSR space. I see a lot of people talking about it. I really need to dive deeper into it and take a look at it. However, it's a little more involved than say Basic Fantasy or White Box, at least from my cursory viewings of it. I want to deal less with a bigger book, and I like the small books, very few rules, and go. Another one I've heard a lot about that I really want to check out is Dungeon Crawl Classics. Dungeon Crawl Classics doesn't. I think they have a quick start PDF. It's not very complete though, from what I saw. However, it's sort of like if you took D&D, you stripped out all the extraneous rules, and then you put a bunch of craziness in it. The cool mechanic of Dungeon Crawl Classics that I like is that your characters don't start at first level. Your characters start at 0 level, and you make a handful of characters, and you run them through a dungeon, and whoever's alive at the end, that's your character. I think that's a great mechanic, and it seems like a lot of fun. And then there's a lot of just craziness, like the tables that are involved, the random tables involved in the game, just create this like sort of weird dungeon delving mashup of insanity. Looks like a lot of fun. I think on Amazon right now, the book is like $30, $35, I think, for me in Canada. All of these you can get on DriveThruRPG as well, either for free or for very little. So those are just like 4 of a wealth of games out there. You have games like Black Hack, which is based on the original D&D, but which is sort of has a Creative Commons license, so anyone can take that book and just redo it and make their own game. And there's tons of hack versions of the game out there for any type of genre, like the Cthulhu hack, the pulp hack. There's what's called the Black Sword hack, which is super cool. It's like a sort of like a grimdark setting or grimdark version of the game. So yeah, that's just a brief overview. But to me, like what really caught me about not just the games themselves when I discovered the games, but the sort of the community surrounding the games was they are very open and very creative, creating their own stuff. Like it, to me, like the OSR sort of movement of tabletop gaming is very much like punk rock, where you have a bunch of people who are doing it for themselves and releasing things on the cheap to make it affordable for people, and they're just creating the games that they want to play, and doesn't matter what everyone else is doing, doesn't matter. I love that. I think it's amazing and creative, and I think a lot more people should be kind of looking at this as their entry point to something other than the biggest role playing game in the world. Especially when you see posts on Facebook and things of people saying, "Oh, I'm hacking apart 5e to create this sort of genre or game." And I was like, "Well, but that already exists. There's a much easier way of doing it." But it's because a lot of people are so ingrained in the game that they play that they can't fathom learning a new game, even if this new game is infinitely easier to play. But again, there's nothing wrong with 5e. I mean, some people do have problems with it, and that's fine. For me, I don't have a problem with the game itself. I had a problem with burning out trying to run the game. I had a problem with the wealth of builds that people are trying to create the strongest character and optimize it, and there seemed to be no challenge in the storytelling. It got boring for me as a dungeon master to run, and if I'm not having fun as a dungeon master, then my table's not going to have fun. If I am sitting there during the week going, "Oh my god, I can't believe I have to play a game this week and I've got nothing prepared," what's my table going to think? Whereas things like basic fantasy role playing, white box, dungeon crawl classics, black hack, looking through all of these amazing games, like I can't even name them all. There's Iron Falcon, there's Swords and Sorcerers of Hyboria. It's a really long title. I don't know if I got that one right. There's Worlds Without Number now. It's like the medieval version of Stars Without Number. There's I can't even name them all, but they all look amazing, and they're all made by very, very creative people that are creating this game based on a very basic rule set that kind of got forgotten and pushed away in favor of more crunch and more complication. And if you want a lot of crunch, if you want to have rules for every specific situation that might come up, that's great. Play your game. You have your fun. Like, I'm not going to tell you you're doing it wrong. There's a reason people enjoy playing it. That's great. But for me, I just couldn't do it anymore. So that's why I found the OSR. And that's why I think if you're curious about it, if you heard about it and you're not quite sure, especially if you're a DM and you start getting that feeling of I'm tired, I feel like I'm just playing the same game over and over again. Getting something like basic fantasy and looking at running games like hex crawls and just sit your players down and say, you know what, this week we're playing this game. We're going to a dungeon and you're going to go through the dungeon and that's it. It's a lot of fun. I've played dungeon crawls in 5e and never works out the same. But creating a map, even a small area of a map with a hexes on it, and knowing that inside those maps there's a couple of dungeons, that looks like a lot of fun to me and requires a lot less preparation. Anyway, I hope this helped. I know it was kind of rambly, but I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe it helped you make a decision about getting into the OSR games. It doesn't mean you have to leave the other games you love, but maybe give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen? You spend $5 on a book and read it, and maybe even just take stuff out of it for your own game. I'm Tristan. This is Heroes and Homebrew. Go ahead and like, subscribe, do that whole thing. I know you guys know what you're doing. This is YouTube. And I'll see you later.